Meghan Markle has just been shut out, not softly, not by accident, but with a door slammed so hard the echo still hasn't faded. A full freeze-out. No calls, no fittings, no partnerships, no questions asked. And for a house like Dior, the same Dior that crowns royalty, dresses legends, and shapes eras, turning someone away is almost unheard of. Yet when it came to Meghan, the decision didn't shock the people who'd seen what unfolded backstage. Whispers inside the fashion world say Dior wasn't chasing chaos. They didn't want headlines. They didn't want uncertainty. Because wherever Meghan stepped, a trail of stories seemed to appear behind her, rumors of gowns that mysteriously vanished, invoices that went unsettled, and photo shoots that ended with more missing items than anyone could account for. Some brushed these murmurs off as gossip. Others claimed they were blown out of proportion. But then something happened, something tiny, but powerful enough to shake the entire room awake. Enough to jolt everyone awake. A dress. A moment. A photo shoot that should have been routine until that soft green gown slipped out of sight the second the cameras shut off, only to magically resurface years later, draped on Meghan herself. And that's when the questions erupted. Why did this one dress cause the ground to shake under Meghan Markle's name? Who else had felt the same tension Dior did? To understand the explosion, you have to rewind back to the very start of the trail. It all began with a picture. A glossy, flawless shot of Meghan posing for a Variety magazine feature, wrapped in a pale green designer dress. Nothing dramatic. Nothing controversial. Just another celebrity portrait, until someone caught a detail that didn't add up. That dress? It never came back. According to the fashion house, Meghan wasn't gifted the gown. It wasn't a purchase. It wasn't a special arrangement. It was a loan, the normal agreement for editorial shoots. But when the crew wrapped in boxes were sealed, the gown was gone. No forms. No approval. No explanation. And the whole thing might have stayed buried forever until Meghan stepped out 3 years later wearing the exact same dress. That second debut didn't just raise eyebrows. It ignited the room. Suddenly, designers, stylists, wardrobe chiefs, everyone remembered the rumors. They remembered the red flags. They remembered the pattern they had ignored. Because insiders say, this wasn't an accident. This was a calling card. The moment that green dress reappeared on Meghan's body, it felt like the universe had dropped a receipt right onto the fashion world's table. Undeniable, unavoidable, impossible to spin. It was the kind of evidence that forces everyone to pause and say, okay, now let's talk about everything else. And once everything else began spilling out, the soft whispers turned into hard conversations. Was Meghan Markle quietly taking high-end pieces again and again without official clearance? But the industry didn't stop at rumors. They started pulling old memories off the shelf, stories buried, experiences forgotten, moments people never thought would matter again. And some of those stories went far deeper than one green gown. When the Variety dress resurfaced, designers didn't gasp. They didn't look confused. They looked exhausted, like they'd seen this movie before. Because for years, stylists had been quietly stepping back, politely dodging requests, finding excuses to avoid lending Meghan pieces for editorial shoots. Assistant designers said they never offered lookbooks for her team. Brand managers reportedly ignored requests coming from her camp. It wasn't personal. It was protective because a pattern had allegedly formed. If Meghan wore something, the designer might never see it again. And then there was Dior, one of the most iconic fashion houses in the world, a brand that dresses royalty without hesitation. Yet, insiders claimed Dior decided no more. They had observed enough. The behavior around borrowed items, the stories from other labels, the unpredictability, the PR risk, and above all, the undeniable feeling that a simple clothing loan could turn into a complicated mess. When a fashion house like Dior pulls away, it isn't dramatic or public. It's silent. It's final. And everyone in the industry hears it. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. Before royalty, before titles, before palace budgets and royal rules, there was Toronto and a simple clothing rack on a Reitman's commercial set. According to wardrobe staff from that shoot, Meghan walked in confident, charming and ready to work. But when the shoot ended, something wasn't right. Some dresses were unaccounted for. A pair of Aquazzura Very Matilda heels were missing. An entire bundle of clothing had quietly disappeared. When the wardrobe coordinator noticed, she didn't panic. Mistakes happen. Sometimes items get placed in the wrong bag. Sometimes assistants forget to return things. But months later, when Meghan wore those exact Aquazzura shoes during her royal engagement announcement, the puzzle pieces snapped together. The missing shoes weren't misplaced. They had been taken. When asked about them, Meghan allegedly gave a simple explanation. She didn't want the items she had worn ending up on eBay. She said she was too famous for that. But fashion insiders wondered if she didn't want them resold. Why didn't she simply ask for them? Why not pay for them like everyone else? The Reitmans incident became the industry's whispered warning. A quiet message, passed from stylist to stylist. Be careful. Things go missing around her. And just like that, the very first crack in Meghan's fashion reputation was born. When Meghan stepped into Kensington Palace, she wasn't entering just another film set. She was stepping into a world built on rules. Old rules. Strict rules. Rules that every royal woman before her had followed without question. But insiders say Meghan arrived carrying a Hollywood mindset. If a designer offers clothing, it's a perk. If a brand wants you to wear their pieces, you're doing them a favor. Except that's not how royalty works at all. The royal family does not accept freebies. Not clothing. Not jewelry. Not accessories. Everything must be purchased, logged, cleared, and accounted for. It's a system designed to prevent scandals. But within weeks, sources said Meghan began requesting designer gifts, something that was completely against protocol. When staff reminded her of the rules, the reactions were sharp. According to insiders, she pushed back. She insisted. She argued. She believed exceptions were being made for her and that more should follow. That's when palace aides realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. Clothing wasn't returning to designers. Borrowed pieces weren't accounted for. Requests were being made that the palace physically could not allow. Some staff tried to explain patiently. No member of the royal family accepts gifted clothing. But Meghan, according to word from the inside, saw these regulations as outdated barriers that shouldn't apply to someone with her Hollywood background. This was the moment the palace began to brace itself. They didn't expect what came next. They didn't expect how quickly the wardrobe issue would grow. Because if Toronto was the opening act and the green variety dress was the spark, Kensington would soon become the place where everything erupted. When Meghan officially became a working royal, Prince Charles took on a formal responsibility. He would fund the wardrobes of his sons' wives while they performed duties on behalf of the crown. It was a long-standing system, logical and simple. But according to financial records and insider accounts, Meghan's clothing expenses skyrocketed so dramatically in her first year that the palace couldn't ignore it. While Princess Catherine spent around £100,000 on clothes for a full year, covering tours, events, state functions, charity engagements, Meghan's wardrobe spending approached £1 million. Nearly 10 times Catherine's total in a single year with fewer engagements. Insiders say Charles was both shocked and concerned. Not because he couldn't afford it, but because of what it signaled. Why were so many items needed? Why were so many pieces never worn again? Why were some designers calling back asking when their items would be returned? Something wasn't adding up. Sources say Charles decided it was time to address the issue directly, not as a confrontation, but as a gentle conversation about royal protocol, expectations, and boundaries. But according to staff who witnessed the aftermath, Meghan did not appreciate being corrected. She reportedly felt targeted. She felt controlled. She felt misunderstood. What Charles had hoped would be a delicate reset became instead a widening crack in the relationship. Behind closed doors, quarters whispered that Meghan did not like being told no. And every time someone tried to guide her on royal rules, the walls between her and the institution grew taller. But the wardrobe issue didn't stop there. Because while Charles dealt with the financial fallout, another storm was brewing. a personal, emotional, deeply awkward rift with one of Meghan's most high-profile acquaintances. A British fashion icon, an international name, and a woman who until then had never been involved in scandal. By this point in the story, the audience always asks the same question. If Meghan is wealthy, why would she take anything? It's a fair question. She lives in a $15 million mansion. She has million-dollar deals. She secured Netflix contracts reportedly worth tens of millions. She has a brand, a platform, a global following. So why would someone with access to almost anything choose to walk away with items that didn't belong to her? Insiders who have watched the pattern closely offer a simple explanation, one that has nothing to do with money. It wasn't about not being able to buy the clothes. It was about feeling entitled to them. Hollywood insiders say Meghan carried herself like someone who believed wearing a designer's piece was already a form of payment, that her image was valuable enough. That rules didn't apply if fame was involved. But inside royalty, that mindset collided with centuries-old expectations. Inside the fashion world, it disrupted sensitive relationships. Inside Kensington, it crossed personal emotional boundaries. The issue wasn't financial, it was behavioral. And once people realized that, they stopped trying to make sense of it.